When Earth first joined the Galactic Council, hardly anyone took humanity seriously. To most of the older alien civilizations, humans were newcomers, loud, emotional, and full of big promises they didn't have the power to keep. The galaxy had seen thousands of species rise and fall, but Earth's arrival felt different. The humans didn't come begging for technology or protection. They came with confidence in their voice and an energy that felt unsettling. The first meeting was held inside the Grand Hall of Stars, a massive structure floating in the middle of neutral space. Every major race had its representative there, creatures of every color, shape, and size, all whispering among themselves as Earth's ambassador took the stand. He looked calm, almost too calm for a being surrounded by powers that had ruled the stars for millennia. When he spoke, his words echoed through the chamber, translated instantly into hundreds of languages. "Humanity comes in peace," he said. "We wish to grow together, trade, and learn. But let this be known, we are holding back. Our strength is not in what you see today, but in what we choose not to use. Do not mistake our peace for weakness." The room fell silent. For a moment, no one moved. Then laughter erupted across the chamber. The elder races saw it as arrogance, the kind that young civilizations often carried before they were humbled by reality. To them, Earth was just another loud voice in a vast sea of worlds. But what they didn't understand was that humanity wasn't boasting. That short speech wasn't a threat. It was a warning, an honest one. In the years that followed, humans tried their best to prove themselves worthy of being part of the galactic community. They opened their trade routes, shared food and medicine, and helped rebuild war-torn colonies that the Council had long forgotten. Everywhere they went, they brought warmth and creativity. They built hospitals on dying planets, restored ecosystems, and offered technology that could purify water or produce clean energy. Some species welcomed them with open arms. Others mocked their compassion. "The humans are emotional creatures," one council member once said during a broadcast. "They mistake kindness for strength." But back on Earth, people didn't care about the mockery. They were too busy working, exploring, building alliances with those who needed help the most. For centuries, humans had fought their own battles, wars, disease, hunger, and had learned to survive anything. Peace was precious to them, and they wanted to protect it. Still, there were whispers. Quiet conversations in back halls of power where alien leaders discussed how far they could push humanity before that warning from years ago would mean something. Some said Earth had no real fleet, that its military was outdated. Others claimed humans had spread themselves too thin. They saw the human spirit of cooperation as a weakness, and that misunderstanding would become the galaxy's biggest mistake. The first sign of trouble came from the outer colonies, small human settlements that had started to appear beyond Council-protected space. These worlds were young, still building their defenses and industries. One night, several of them stopped responding. Trade convoys went missing. Cargo ships full of medicine vanished between jump points. When Earth's diplomats demanded answers, the Council called them navigation accidents, but deep down, everyone knew it wasn't an accident. An entire mining world, a planet of 20,000 humans, was wiped clean. The attackers never took credit, but fragments of alien technology were found among the ruins. Earth's ambassadors brought the evidence before the Council, hoping for justice. Instead, they were told that it was a misunderstanding, and that aggressive investigations might destabilize peace. That day, something inside humanity began to shift. They still smiled at meetings. They still traded, but their silence carried a weight that no one could ignore. The same ambassador who had once spoken with warmth now answered every insult with a calm stare that sent shivers through even the oldest races. "We are patient," he said once, after yet another hearing ended with no justice. But patience has limits. Despite the tension, life on Earth continued. People went to work, children learned about alien worlds in school, and humanity's dream of a united galaxy still lived in ordinary hearts. But under the surface, there was an uneasiness no one wanted to talk about. The governments of Earth and its colonies began meeting in private. Fleets that had once been purely for exploration quietly changed their configurations. To the outside observer, it looked like routine maintenance. But to those who paid attention, there was something different about the ships now leaving the shipyards. They were heavier, stronger, silent. Across the stars, rumors spread about secret human projects. Some claimed Earth had developed new kinds of propulsion. Others said they were testing defense grids powerful enough to bend light. The truth was somewhere in between. Humanity had never stopped innovating. They had always been creators, thinkers, problem solvers. And now they were preparing, not for revenge, but for survival. Still, the galaxy didn't believe it. Old civilizations, proud and comfortable in their power, continued to underestimate the newcomers from Sol. "They think too much of themselves," said one council general. "They talk about holding back as if they could ever threaten us." The laughter continued. But back home, the people of Earth remembered every insult, every loss, every unanswered distress call. They didn't seek war, but they also refused to be victims. One evening, during another council gathering, a young representative from a smaller species approached the human ambassador privately. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Why do you stay?" he asked. "They mock you, ignore your pain, and treat your people unfairly. Why not leave the council altogether?" The ambassador smiled gently. "Because walking away would mean we've given up on peace, and we are not ready to give up. Not yet." The young alien nodded but couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something deeper behind those words. Humanity's calm wasn't weakness. It was a decision, a choice to wait until all other paths were exhausted. Weeks later, a broadcast spread across the galaxy. A human relief convoy, 10 ships carrying food and medicine, had been destroyed on its way to aid a dying planet. The attackers claimed it was an accident, but everyone knew it wasn't. Millions of beings watched the footage, ships burning silently in the dark, their distress signals ignored by nearby fleets. The galaxy waited for Earth to react. But once again, humanity said nothing. No retaliation. No public anger. Just silence. To some, that silence meant fear. To others, it meant something much worse. Because humanity's silence had always been a sign of restraint. And when restraint ends, storms begin. For now, the galaxy still went about its business, believing that humanity had finally learned its place. Trade continued. Politics played out as usual. But far away on the blue planet that started it all, factories began to hum louder. Shipyards glowed brighter in the night. And for the first time in 100 years, every nation on Earth agreed on one thing. Enough was enough. They had given the galaxy their friendship, their help, and their patience. And all it brought them was mockery and loss. People no longer spoke of the council with hope. They spoke of it with resolve. "If they want to see what humanity looks like without restraint," one admiral said quietly, "then let them see." And so, while the stars remained calm and the council continued its endless debates, humanity began to move differently. Quietly. Purposefully. Not in anger, but in preparation. The warning that had once been laughed at all those years ago was about to take on a new meaning. Earth wasn't holding back out of fear or weakness. It had been holding back out of mercy, and mercy, like patience, doesn't last forever. For a while, the galaxy seemed calm again. Trade continued. Meetings in the Galactic Council went on as usual. But deep beneath the surface, things were changing. Human cargo ships began to vanish along quiet routes. Colonies on the edge of explored space sent distress signals that were never answered. And whenever Earth demanded an explanation, the Council gave the same response. "We'll investigate." But the investigations never came. The Council's powerful members, the same ones who had laughed at Earth's first warning, started to test humanity's patience, slowly and carefully. A blockade appeared around one of Earth's mining stations. Then came tariffs on human goods. Soon after, alien raiders began attacking supply ships that carried food and medicine. At first, people on Earth tried to believe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe pirates, maybe bad luck. But the attacks grew bolder. Some aliens even began broadcasting taunting messages, calling humans soft-hearted and too peaceful to fight back. Every loss hurt deeply. Every destroyed ship was another reminder that the galaxy didn't take Earth seriously. And yet humanity stayed quiet. They refused to be the ones to start a war. Months passed and the tension grew heavier. The human news channels began showing footage of destroyed convoys, burning ships floating silently in the void, their signal lights fading one by one. Families waited for messages from loved ones that never came. The people were angry. Protests began across the colonies demanding answers from the Council. But the Council's spokespeople stood firm. saying the same polished lines. There is no proof of deliberate action. It's likely a navigation error. We encourage Earth to stay calm. Calm. That word began to feel like an insult. On Earth, military commanders held closed-door meetings that lasted through the night. They studied every destroyed vessel, every intercepted transmission, and every trade route that had been accidentally blocked. It didn't take long to see the pattern. Certain council races, ones that feared humanity's growing influence, were quietly testing how far they could push before Earth would break. But humanity didn't break, not yet. The breaking point came when a humanitarian mission left for the distant colonies. 10 ships loaded with food, medicine, and rescue workers were sent to help a planet suffering from a deadly plague. The mission was peaceful, unarmed, carrying only hope and supplies. Halfway through their journey, they were ambushed. The attackers didn't send warnings or ask questions. Within minutes, all 10 ships were gone, wiped out in a flash of light. The footage, recorded by a nearby probe, showed the convoy exploding silently in space one by one, until nothing remained but drifting debris. The broadcast spread across the galaxy within hours. Billions watched as the images played on repeat. And through it all, Earth remained silent. No angry declarations, no revenge attacks, just silence. But anyone who had ever studied human history knew what that kind of silence meant. It wasn't fear. It was the deep breath before a storm. Inside the council hall, chaos erupted. Some races demanded that Earth be punished for creating unnecessary tension. Others wanted to investigate the attackers, but those voices were quickly silenced. The council's leaders called for restraint. They believed humanity would eventually calm down. But back on Earth, there was no calming down. Factories that had been dormant for decades suddenly came back online. Shipyards that had been producing passenger vessels started refitting them with armor plating. Deep beneath the oceans, long-hidden research facilities began sending encrypted transmissions to the Defense Command. Something was changing. Something big. Still, humanity said nothing to the galaxy. There were no speeches, no threats, no messages. Only quiet preparation. Ordinary people on Earth could feel it too. Workers stayed longer in factories. Engineers worked through nights, and scientists moved projects forward faster than ever before. The world had gone into silent motion. Families who had lost loved ones in the attacks were no longer mourning. They were determined. If peace is something they won't respect, one worker said during an interview, then maybe they'll respect strength. Even the younger generations, who had grown up believing in harmony with alien life, began to see the truth. Peace meant nothing if it wasn't protected. The idea of a united humanity, once only a dream, started becoming real. Old political divisions faded. For the first time in centuries, every human nation, every colony, and every settlement stood together. The Council, however, remained blind to it all. From their point of view, Earth was quiet and compliant. They took that as a sign of weakness, so they pushed harder. A trade embargo was placed on Terran exports. Key space stations under human management were reassigned to other races. When Earth tried to protest, their communications were ignored. Some council leaders even began to openly mock humanity during press conferences, saying things like, "Perhaps the humans should stick to farming. The stars are too harsh for them." Those words spread quickly across human networks. But instead of anger, there was focus. The insults didn't break them. They fueled them. "Let them talk," said one ship engineer as she worked beneath the glowing frame of a massive new starship. "While they laugh, we'll build." Behind the scenes, Earth scientists were pushing technology far beyond what anyone thought possible. They had always been inventive, but now they worked with purpose. Propulsion drives were redesigned. Energy shields were strengthened. Weapon systems, once theoretical, were tested in secret. The most advanced shipyards were hidden in places no outsider could find, deep in asteroid belts, under icy moons, and inside mobile stations that drifted between jump lanes. Every ship they built carried the same insignia, a simple blue and silver Earth emblem, and a single phrase beneath it: "For those who fell." Humanity wasn't preparing for conquest. They were preparing for justice. On the day of the Council's next assembly, Earth's representative arrived alone. He stood before hundreds of alien leaders, all waiting to hear his response to the recent incidents. Cameras broadcasted his face across thousands of worlds. The hall was silent. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make threats. He simply said, "You have mistaken peace for surrender. You have mistaken silence for fear. But we do not forget our dead, and we do not forgive betrayal. You asked for calm. You'll have it. For now." Then he turned and walked out. No one in that chamber could fully understand the weight of his words, but the few who had studied humanity's past, their resilience, their history of survival, knew something terrible had just shifted. After that day, humanity completely withdrew from galactic politics. Their diplomats left the council. Their trade routes closed. The flow of information stopped, and the galaxy once again laughed. "They've gone into hiding," said one broadcast host. "The humans can't handle pressure. They've given up." But hidden deep in the Sol system, fleets were gathering. The Terran Defense Accord, a united command of every human nation, was born. All across the colonies, messages were transmitted in coded bursts. Operation Dawnlight initiated. Factories never slept. Every day, hundreds of new ships joined the growing formation around Earth. Military academies trained a new kind of soldier, not for offense, but for defense of all humankind. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but something unstoppable was being forged in silence. Meanwhile, alien citizens, ordinary people, not their leaders, began to wonder if the council had gone too far. Many had grown fond of humans over the years. They remembered the doctors who came to their worlds, the engineers who repaired broken machines, the teachers who taught their children. They couldn't understand why the council was treating Earth so harshly. But their questions were ignored. The council had made its choice. They believed they could handle humanity if things ever escalated. They were wrong. As months turned into years, the galaxy started to notice strange readings. Unknown energy signatures coming from the Sol system. Scout probes that ventured too close were politely warned to turn back. Some didn't listen, and none of those ever returned. Whispers began to spread through the stars. Stories of massive human fleets seen training in dark space. Stories of new technologies capable of bending light, piercing shields, and disabling entire ships without a single shot fired. But there were no confirmations, no proofs, only rumors. And yet even the boldest races began to feel a quiet unease. They had pushed humanity to its limit. And now, for the first time, no one could predict what Earth would do next. After the destruction of the relief convoy, the galaxy went silent. No one dared to speak too loudly about what had happened. The council claimed it was under investigation, but everyone knew that meant nothing would be done. The powerful races were confident that humanity would remain quiet, just as it always had. But they didn't realize that Earth's silence this time was different. It wasn't calm. It wasn't peace. It was the deep stillness that comes before something awakens. For the first few months, everything appeared normal on the surface. Human diplomats stopped attending council meetings. Trade slowed down, but no ships crossed into enemy space. News channels and other systems said Earth had given up. But if anyone had looked closer, they would have seen the truth hiding beneath that quiet surface. Earth was preparing. In the Sol system, every world came alive with activity. Old shipyards that had been abandoned decades ago began to glow again. Massive orbital docks were rebuilt, and fleets of transport ships carried metals, minerals, and machinery from one planet to another. The change happened so smoothly that most outsiders didn't even notice. There were no public announcements, no military parades, no loud speeches. Humanity was done talking. They had spoken their warning years ago, and now it was time to act on it. Factories once used to build transport ships started creating something else, larger, stronger, and far more advanced. Engineers worked day and night, guided by silent orders from the new Terran Defense Accord. Scientists who had spent their lives working on civilian technology were quietly moved to classified projects. Each new ship that left the docks carried a small engraving near its hull. For the lost, inside the command centers, leaders from every human nation sat together for the first time in history. Old rivalries and political divisions were forgotten. There was no room for pride or disagreement anymore. Humanity had one voice, one goal, one mission: to protect itself and make sure no one ever dared harm their people again. The Accord's first act was simple but powerful: unify every human ship, from defense fleets to exploration vessels, under one command. No more scattered forces, no more confusion. Every ship would now answer to Earth's central command. Slowly, a plan took shape. It wasn't about revenge. It was about control. Humanity had learned through centuries of struggle that anger without discipline was useless. They didn't want chaos, they wanted order, and they were building it in silence. Meanwhile, out in the wider galaxy, life went on as usual. Council members met daily to discuss trade, politics, and border disputes. When Earth's name came up, they brushed it aside. "They're too quiet," one alien leader said during a meeting. "Maybe they finally realized their place." Another replied with laughter. "Humans are dramatic. They'll shout, then fade away like before." But one or two among them weren't laughing. A few remembered the day Earth first joined the Council, the way the ambassador had spoken, the calm power behind those words. They couldn't forget that warning. "We are holding back." Something deep in their instincts told them that this silence wasn't surrender. It was waiting. On Earth, the air was different. People could feel something coming. The news channels didn't talk about it, but the signs were everywhere. Lights in the shipyards burned all night. Massive cargo freighters moved constantly between planets. Civilian engineers spoke quietly about new technologies being tested on Mars and Titan. Even ordinary citizens sensed that their world was changing. Some were afraid, others were proud. But everyone understood one thing. Humanity was no longer playing by the galaxy's rules. They had tried peace, patience, and diplomacy. None of it worked. So now they were building their own path, one that didn't depend on anyone else. The Terran Defense Accord worked in complete secrecy. Their communication networks were sealed, their transmissions coded with encryption so advanced that even the Council's best analyst couldn't break it. Hidden under Earth's oceans, inside hollowed-out moons and deep in asteroid belts, they constructed weapons and ships unlike anything seen before. But what made the human fleet truly powerful wasn't the technology. It was the people behind it. Humanity had always been at its strongest when pushed to the edge. The same stubborn will that had once driven them to cross oceans and explore the stars was now being used to defend their place among them. Every pilot, every engineer, every scientist knew why they were working. They remembered the destroyed convoys, the broken colonies, the silence from the Council. They didn't crave revenge, they wanted justice. In secret, the Accord began testing its new ships. Deep in uncharted regions, far from prying eyes, entire fleets practiced maneuvers that no other species could match. Their new propulsion systems allowed them to jump between points faster than any known drive. Their defense fields could absorb attacks that once tore through metal. But the most impressive part was their coordination. Every ship was linked through a shared command network that let them move as one, reacting instantly and perfectly to any situation. They called this project Unity Protocol. And it was more than technology. It was a reflection of humanity itself. No longer divided by borders or politics, humanity had finally become what it was always meant to be. One. Back in the Galactic Council, rumors started spreading. A few traders claimed they'd seen strange human ships in deep space, massive and silent, moving faster than light should allow. Others dismissed it as gossip. But soon, too many reports matched. The Council began to take notice. "What are they doing?" one representative asked. "Rebuilding," another replied uneasily. But no one knows why. Spies were sent toward the Sol system, but they never returned. Every probe, every drone that entered human space simply disappeared. No debris, no signal, nothing. It was as if Earth had become invisible. The Council grew nervous, but their pride wouldn't let them admit it. They convinced themselves that humanity's so-called fleet was just a bluff, a show of strength meant to win sympathy. But they were wrong. Months turned into years, and Earth remained completely silent. No messages, no public appearances, no participation in galactic trade. To the outside world, it looked like isolation. But inside, humanity was standing taller than ever before. Their cities had become brighter, cleaner, and more unified. Colonies once divided by distance now felt connected by purpose. The human spirit had evolved. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about showing the galaxy who they truly were. They had been mocked, underestimated, and ignored for far too long. And now, the time of warnings was over. When the Terran fleets were finally completed, they weren't paraded or announced. There were no speeches, no grand ceremonies. They simply existed, waiting quietly in orbit around distant moons and hidden stations. The flagship of the new fleet, a massive vessel built with unknown alloys, carried a single message etched across its hull. Peace through strength. Justice through unity. The ship's design broke every known rule of physics. It could appear and vanish without a trace, bending light around its hull. Its energy core pulsed softly, powered by technology the rest of the galaxy hadn't even dreamed of. But this wasn't a weapon of conquest. It was a shield, a warning. Humanity had no interest in ruling others, they only wanted to make sure no one could ever harm them again. Then one day, something strange happened. A small council scout ship entered Terran space, broadcasting a message of peaceful intent. Humanity didn't respond with weapons or hostility. Instead, they sent back a simple transmission, just one sentence. We remember what was done. We forgive nothing, but we seek no war. Stay out of our skies, that was all. The message was calm, emotionless, but it carried more power than any threat ever could. The scout ship turned back immediately. The council tried to analyze the signal, but their systems couldn't even identify the frequency it was sent on. Whatever Earth had become, it was far beyond what anyone could measure. In the years that followed, alien traders noticed something remarkable. Human goods, ships, medicine, machines began appearing again on the market. They were more advanced, more efficient, and more beautiful than ever before. But no one knew where they were coming from. It was as if Earth had transcended into something untouchable, still part of the galaxy, but no longer bound by it. And through all of this, the humans never said a word. They didn't boast, didn't threaten, didn't demand. They simply continued, focused and united. The council could sense it. The calm that once seemed harmless now felt heavy, like a wave about to rise. Everyone began to realize the same thing, though no one dared to say it out loud. Humanity wasn't silent because it was weak. It was silent because it was ready. For months, the galaxy whispered about Earth. Nobody really knew what was happening inside the Sol system. Every ship that went near it vanished, and every probe sent by curious governments simply stopped transmitting. It was as if the entire system had been covered by a silent curtain. Still, the council wasn't worried. They believed humanity had isolated itself forever, hiding behind fear and pride. In their minds, Earth had become nothing more than a ghost among the stars, a once hopeful race that had tried to stand tall but failed. They were wrong. Earth hadn't gone silent out of fear. It had gone silent to prepare. One quiet day, without warning, everything changed. It began in the Outer Rim, a peaceful region near the colonies that once traded with Earth. An alien empire known for its arrogance was showing off its military power, trying to scare smaller worlds into obedience. One of those small planets was home to a few human settlers. When that empire's fleet arrived and demanded surrender, they thought humanity would flee like before. But instead of fear, the humans simply sent a short transmission to Earth, a request for help. And then, the stars shifted. Within hours, a human fleet appeared. No one had seen ships like these before. They moved like shadows. No energy signatures, no engine trails, no warnings. The alien sensors didn't even detect them until they were already there, floating silently above the planet. The lead ship, enormous and sleek, transmitted a simple message to the enemy fleet. "This is Terran space. Leave immediately." The alien admiral laughed and ordered his ships to attack. That was the last order he ever gave. Within minutes, the alien fleet's weapons shut down one by one. Their engines went offline. Their shields flickered out. But there were no explosions, no violence, just power failure across every ship. It was like the universe itself had turned them off. When the darkness lifted, the alien ships were still floating, unharmed but helpless. Then a second message came from the human flagship. "We have disabled your weapons. You may leave. There will be no second warning." And then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, the human fleet vanished. The entire event lasted less than an hour, but its effect spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Thousands of witnesses had recorded it. People saw the moment an entire empire's fleet, one of the strongest in the galaxy, was stopped without a single shot fired. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt fear. Everyone wanted to know how Earth had done it. How could ships move unseen, disable entire fleets, and disappear without trace? Some said it was dark energy technology. Others whispered about artificial intelligence so advanced it could predict battles before they happened. But no one really knew, and that was what frightened them the most. Inside the council, panic quietly replaced arrogance. Emergency meetings were held every day. Worlds that once mocked humanity now questioned whether they had made a terrible mistake. The same ambassadors who had laughed at Earth's warnings now spoke in careful tones, as if afraid their words might be heard back on Sol. The council demanded an explanation. They sent envoys to Earth's old communication channels trying to reach someone, anyone, but there was no reply. For weeks, the galaxy waited. Every world was on edge. Every military prepared for the unknown. Then at last the silence broke. A broadcast appeared across every major communication network at once. The image was simple. A dark background with the symbol of Earth glowing in the center. A calm voice spoke, slow and steady. "We warned you. We offered peace and it was ignored. We held back for the sake of unity. That time is over. We will no longer stand by while corruption and cruelty rule the stars." There was no anger in the voice, no rage, just certainty. The message ended with a final line that every being across the galaxy would remember for generations. "We are done being nice," and then the screen went black. That single broadcast changed everything. The galaxy had known powerful civilizations before, but none had spoken with such calm finality. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of truth. In the following days, small fleets began to appear across border worlds. Not to conquer, not to destroy, but to restore balance. Human ships entered systems where corruption had long ruled, where smaller species had been enslaved or exploited. They didn't come as invaders. They came as protectors. In one region, a human fleet forced an empire to release thousands of captured laborers. In another, they dismantled illegal mining stations that had poisoned entire planets. But through it all, they never stayed to occupy or control. Once their mission was done, they left without a word. It was power with purpose, and it sent a message that echoed louder than any explosion could. Humanity had returned, not to rule, but to make the galaxy accountable. For ordinary people across the stars, humanity became something legendary. The weak and oppressed saw hope in their actions. Small colonies started flying Terran symbols over their cities, not as a show of loyalty, but as a sign of faith, that someone finally cared. But for the powerful empires, that hope was fear. They realized that their weapons and wealth meant nothing against a force that didn't seek power, but demanded justice. Meetings in the council grew tense. Many races wanted to negotiate, but some still believed they could intimidate Earth. One council leader said boldly, "They can't be everywhere at once. They'll have to stop eventually." He was wrong. The next morning, his entire fleet was found drifting in deep space, systems frozen and weapons locked. No one had been harmed, but every ship had the same message displayed across its monitors: "Stand down. The age of fear is ending." As the weeks went on, Earth's influence spread quietly, but unlike the empires before them, they didn't use force to control. Instead, they offered aid, protection, and trade built on fairness. Planets that had once feared humanity now reached out to them willingly. Many even withdrew from the council, choosing instead to join new alliances guided by Earth's principles. And yet humanity still didn't claim leadership. They didn't sit on thrones or build monuments. They didn't demand tribute or glory. Their ships simply patrolled the stars, ensuring no one abused their power again. It wasn't dominance. It was balance. Within human command, there was no celebration, no victory speeches, just quiet focus. The men and women who had worked for years to rebuild Earth's strength knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something larger, a new kind of peace. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy began to stabilize. Trade became fair. Borders opened safely. Wars that had lasted generations came to an end. And behind it all was the quiet strength of humanity, watching, guiding, and protecting from the shadows. Some called them the Guardians of Sol. Others simply called them the Silent Watchers. But to most, they were the reason children could grow up without fear. Still, there were those who couldn't let go of the past. The few remaining warlords and corrupt leaders plotted in secret, dreaming of revenge. They whispered that one day humanity would show weakness again. But those who truly understood the humans knew better. Humanity didn't seek control or destruction. They didn't crave recognition or fear. They simply believed in something the galaxy had forgotten, a simple truth that had been written in their history from the beginning. Peace is not the absence of power. It's the choice to use power wisely, and now the galaxy had finally seen what happened when Earth stopped holding back. They didn't conquer worlds. They changed them. Far away above the blue glow of Earth, the first Terran fleet drifted silently, watching the stars. The ships didn't shine with lights or noise, they simply existed, calm and still. From orbit, you could see the reflection of Earth's oceans, its cities glowing softly beneath the clouds. Humanity had come a long way, from being mocked and ignored to becoming the force that kept the galaxy in balance. The calm voice of the fleet commander broke the silence. They understand now. That's enough. And with that, the ships turned slowly, disappearing back into the stars, leaving behind a galaxy that would never forget the day Earth proved its warning was real. The impact of Earth's actions reverberated across the galaxy like a silent earthquake. The Council, once so confident in its power, suddenly realized that it had misjudged humanity in ways that could not be undone. Meetings that had once been full of arrogance and laughter now trembled with nervous energy. Every member felt it, even those who tried to appear calm. For centuries, these races had dominated smaller civilizations, taken what they wanted, and believed no one could challenge them. But Earth had shattered that illusion without a single battle in the traditional sense. Their fleets didn't destroy planets, their weapons didn't annihilate cities. They simply showed what it meant to hold control without losing humanity. And that terrified the galaxy's elites. The fear wasn't just political. It was deeply personal. Ambassadors, admirals, and scientists who had spent lifetimes climbing the ranks suddenly questioned everything. How had humans moved so quickly, so silently, so precisely? How had they created ships and technologies no one had detected? How had they turned patience into power? No one had answers, and so fear grew. It spread quietly at first, whispered in back rooms and private gatherings. Then it became impossible to ignore. Entire governments began recalling their fleets from border systems. Commands once meant to intimidate now came with hesitation. Leaders who had once laughed at humanity's warnings now spoke in hushed tones, consulting advisors constantly. The galaxy realized something crucial. They had awakened a force that would not rest until fairness and order were restored. Across council chambers, debates turned into panic sessions. Some argued that Earth could be reasoned with, that compromise was still possible. Others were more fearful, insisting that their worlds must submit or face disruption. But no one truly understood what submission meant. Humans didn't seek to dominate, they sought balance. The most terrifying part was simple. The humans had barely used any of their power. The fleets and technologies that had emerged so suddenly were only a fraction of what humanity had built in secret. Nobody knew the full extent of Earth's capabilities, and that uncertainty made everyone uneasy. Council leaders began to question their assumptions. They realized that for decades, they had underestimated a species that had survived war, famine, and countless disasters on its own planet. The humans had grown strong not because of arrogance or greed, but because of necessity, unity, and resilience. The ordinary citizens of the galaxy felt it too. Stories spread quickly, some based on fact, some exaggerated, but the overall effect was real. Traders, miners, and scientists began sharing tales of Terran fleets appearing in distant systems, silently protecting colonies, dismantling corrupt operations, and leaving behind no harm, no destruction, only order. People who had never interacted with humans personally began to respect them, even fear them. And yet the respect was not born of intimidation, it was admiration. Humanity had shown that true power didn't need to humiliate or destroy. It could protect, restore, and inspire. Small planets that had once struggled under the rule of larger empires started to feel hope. Communities began organizing themselves in ways they never had before, inspired by the example humans had set. Civilization itself felt a subtle shift. Within the council, panic reached its peak. Races that had once controlled thousands of star systems found themselves unable to act freely. Fleets no longer moved with authority because no one wanted to provoke humanity. Spies who once ventured boldly into Terran space returned, if they returned at all, and reported nothing but silence, shadows, and disciplined precision. The Council's pride was shattered. Those who had been sure that humans were weak now admitted, at least privately, that they were wrong. Some tried to mask it with political talk, offering peace agreements and trade deals that they hoped would placate Earth. Others were more desperate, suggesting isolation strategies or alliances meant to counter the Terran fleet, but even they doubted their effectiveness. For the first time, the galaxy truly feared the consequences of underestimating humanity. Back on Earth, the humans observed the galaxy quietly as they always had. They did not gloat. They did not celebrate. They simply ensured that every system, every colony, every world they had promised to protect remained safe. Human leaders had learned a lesson long ago. Power without purpose was meaningless. Their goal had never been revenge or conquest. They wanted fairness, order, and protection for those who could not protect themselves. And as the galaxy scrambled, humanity continued its work quietly, calmly, and efficiently. The fleet patrolled silently near critical sectors, ensuring no one threatened smaller species. Engineers repaired neglected colonies, scientists restored ecosystems damaged by neglect, and administrators organized trade so that nothing was taken unfairly. Every action was deliberate, measured, and meant to reinforce balance rather than dominance. The fear across the council grew as they realized how thoroughly humans had prepared. For years, the galaxy had ignored warnings, tested limits, and pushed humanity to extremes. Now the humans had demonstrated that they could respond without malice, without aggression, but with unshakable precision. Every empire began to question its past actions. They realized that the humans had remembered everything: the attacks, the mockery, the lost ships, the silent neglect of pleas for help. And yet humanity had not struck blindly. They had waited for the right moment, studied every detail, and acted with wisdom far beyond what most civilizations could comprehend. Even the most cunning strategists admitted that humans had done what no one else could: turn restraint into strategy. Amid the fear, whispers of hope also spread. Small colonies and independent worlds started sending envoys to Earth, seeking guidance, protection, or assistance. These were not military alliances. They were communities seeking fairness, safety, and security. Humanity responded quietly. They didn't demand allegiance. They offered help, guidance, and protection for those who needed it. Systems that had once been oppressed began to thrive. The galaxy had underestimated humans for centuries, but now their actions spoke louder than words. People across countless worlds began to see humans not just as powerful, but as trustworthy. They realized that when Earth acted, it was not for glory or gain, it was for what was right. Even those who had sought to resist or undermine humanity began to feel a strange respect. Some council leaders started to quietly adopt human practices in governance, trade, and defense. Diplomats studied human strategies, fleet commanders analyzed Terran maneuvers, and scientists reverse-engineered observations to understand the innovations humans had created. In doing so, they discovered a truth that terrified them even more. Humanity's greatest strength was not its technology, nor its fleet, nor its power. It was its unity. A species that could set aside old divisions, work together with clarity, and act with purpose could achieve far more than any empire built on fear or arrogance. The realization sank slowly, but firmly, into the minds of the galaxy's leaders. As weeks turned into months, the council grew quieter, more cautious. Where once their decisions had been bold and self-assured, now they were tentative and calculated. Even the most aggressive species began to hesitate before acting. Humanity's influence had shifted the balance of power, not through destruction, but through precision, intelligence, and moral clarity. Every council member understood that humanity was no longer the young, naive species they had once mocked. Earth had become a force that could not be ignored, underestimated, or challenged lightly. And every empire began to consider the consequences of another misstep, knowing that humanity's response would be swift, smart, and devastating if pushed. For ordinary humans, the changes were subtle. Life continued on the planets of Earth and its colonies. Children played in cities, markets bustled with trade, and the night skies glowed with the hum of unseen fleets. Yet behind this normalcy, the human spirit remained vigilant. Every citizen, from engineer to teacher, from pilot to farmer, understood the role they now played in protecting the galaxy, not for fame, not for glory, but because it was the right thing to do. This quiet courage became the true legacy of humanity. They had faced mockery, loss, and neglect, and turned it all into preparation, unity, and purpose. And in doing so, they taught the galaxy an important lesson. True strength is not measured by power alone, but by the ability to act wisely when others underestimate you. The fear across the council was now complete. Every empire, every fleet, every diplomat knew the same truth. Humanity could no longer be ignored. Their patience, once mistaken for weakness, was now recognized as something far more dangerous, calculated, measured, and unstoppable. And yet, despite all the power and influence they had amassed, humanity did not rule. They did not dictate. They simply ensured balance, fairness, and protection, showing the galaxy a future that had never seemed possible before. In a universe full of greed, ambition, and fear, humanity had become something extraordinary. Not conquerors, not tyrants, guardians. The galaxy had changed. No one could deny it anymore. Humanity had moved quietly, efficiently, and deliberately, showing that patience was not weakness and restraint was not ignorance. Empires that once laughed at the soft-hearted humans now realized they had been foolish. And yet Earth had done all of this without boasting, without attacking, without seeking revenge. Instead, humanity had created balance. It began with small acts that seemed almost invisible at first. Trade routes that had been blocked for decades were reopened. Colonies that had been abandoned due to corruption or neglect were restored. Water systems, energy grids, and medical facilities were repaired or rebuilt. Wherever humans went, they didn't just bring technology, they brought knowledge, care, and planning. These were not gestures of power. They were gestures of responsibility. Humanity had learned that true strength is measured not by how many worlds you can conquer, but by how much good you can protect. Alien worlds started to notice the difference. Species that had long suffered under oppressive regimes found themselves able to rebuild safely. Farmers on distant planets no longer worried about fleets raiding their crops. Children played in cities that humans had helped stabilize, and communities began trading fairly again. Everywhere, the word spread. Humans didn't rule, but they were reliable. They didn't dominate, but they protected. They didn't threaten, but they enforced justice. It was a new model of power, quiet, invisible, and absolute. Back in the council, panic had not entirely faded, but it had shifted into respect and wariness. Leaders who had once mocked Earth now spoke carefully. Meetings that had been full of arrogance were replaced with careful debate. Even the most aggressive empires hesitated before taking any action, knowing that humans could respond in ways no one could predict. The council tried to understand how humans had achieved it, but answers were scarce. Observers reported Terran fleets moving in perfect silence, infrastructure being repaired almost overnight, and systems operating with efficiency no one had ever seen. Humans had turned their patience into a force the galaxy could neither challenge nor fully comprehend. The ordinary citizens of the galaxy began to notice too. Stories of human assistance and protection spread faster than any political announcement. People told tales of fleets appearing suddenly to stop disasters, of engineers restoring collapsed cities, and of scientists teaching new generations of children how to protect their worlds. Humans were not feared in the usual way. They were respected, trusted, admired. It was a shift in the universe itself. For centuries, civilizations had ruled through fear or brute strength. Now there was an example of a species that ruled through wisdom, preparation, and moral courage. Within Earth's command centers, nothing had changed outwardly. Ships moved silently, factories hummed in perfect rhythm, and scientists continued their work. There were no celebrations, no displays of glory. Humanity did not need recognition. They measured their success not by fear or obedience, but by the lives they had protected and the balance they had restored. Still, for those who had worked behind the scenes for years, the moment felt historic. The countless hours of research, the secret fleets, the strategic planning, it had all led to this. Humanity had proven its warning was real. When they said they were holding back, they truly meant it. And now they had stopped holding back. Alien leaders began to approach Earth with caution. Envoys arrived not to negotiate power or trade, but to learn. They came to understand the Terran way of thinking, the strategy behind humanity's patience, and the discipline behind its fleet. Humans responded with guidance, not orders. They taught techniques for protecting colonies, rebuilding infrastructure and creating alliances based on fairness rather than fear. Slowly, the galaxy began to adopt some of these practices. Corruption decreased. Conflict still existed, but on smaller scales and with more accountability. For the first time, civilizations started thinking beyond their own power. They thought about the universe as a whole, inspired by humanity's example. At the same time, Earth maintained its independence. They did not control the council, they did not dictate laws, and they did not seek tribute. They simply ensured that the galaxy would no longer ignore justice and fairness. The Terran fleet continued to patrol quietly in the shadows, ready to respond if needed, but rarely intervening. Humans had discovered something vital. Power was most effective when it was invisible, when it did not provoke, when it allowed others to grow under protection rather than force. And yet, there were still whispers of fear. Some empires plotted quietly, hoping that humans might one day weaken. But the lesson had been learned too clearly. Humanity's strength was not in anger or weaponry alone. It was in discipline, unity, and moral clarity. They could be provoked, but they would respond wisely and decisively. No one would ever underestimate them again. The galaxy had to respect that restraint was not weakness. Patience was not passivity. Silence was not submission. Humans had changed the rules of interaction in the galaxy. Their approach was not about domination. It was about accountability, protection, and balance. And this was more powerful than any fleet, more enduring than any weapon, and more enduring than any empire that had ruled through fear. For ordinary citizens across countless planets, the presence of humanity brought hope. Young people now looked up at the stars and imagined a future where even the smallest world could thrive, protected by intelligence, fairness, and courage. Humanity had shown them a new way. In Earth's orbit, the fleets remained poised but silent. Ships moved without energy trails. Communications were encrypted, and no one outside Earth truly knew the full extent of the preparations. But every vessel, every engineer, every pilot understood the mission: protect life, restore order, and maintain balance. This was not a fleet built for war. It was a fleet built for responsibility. And in the galaxy, everyone now understood that this was the greatest power of all. Even the Council eventually adjusted. Members who had once laughed at humanity now sought counsel. They did not ask for tribute or obedience, they asked for wisdom, strategy, and guidance. Humanity provided it carefully and without superiority, teaching that the most important lesson was understanding, not domination. The galaxy began to heal. Old conflicts subsided. Trade resumed under fair rules. Colonies and planets flourished once more. Humanity had set the standard, and the results spoke for themselves. In the end, the Terran people did not announce victory. There was no celebration across the stars. Their message had already been delivered years ago, quietly, through action rather than words. The galaxy had learned a lesson that could not be unlearned. Underestimate humanity at your peril, respect their restraint, and value the power of discipline and unity. Children on distant worlds no longer feared their neighbors. Leaders began to govern with fairness in mind, and the entire galaxy slowly adapted to a new reality, one inspired by the humans of Earth. And so, humanity continued. Not as conquerors, not as tyrants, not as rulers, but as guardians, guardians of life, fairness, and balance. The galaxy had once thought Earth was weak. It had laughed at their warnings, dismissed their patience, and ignored their appeals. Now the galaxy knew the truth. Earth had been holding back. And now, they were done being nice. The stars above Earth shone quietly that night. The fleets rested in hidden orbits. The cities glowed softly, and ordinary people looked up, unaware of the full scope of what their species had accomplished. But deep within every human heart, there was pride, not in power, but in responsibility. Humanity had faced centuries of doubt, loss, and mockery, and had emerged as a force that no one could challenge, not through fear, not through force, not through arrogance. They had changed the galaxy, and in doing so, they had changed themselves. The lesson was simple yet powerful. Strength lies in unity. Patience is a weapon, restraint is power, and the universe would never forget it. The galaxy had feared humanity. It had underestimated humanity, but the universe had also learned to respect them. And Earth continued, quietly, vigilantly, and with the same calm certainty that had once been laughed at. Because now, the galaxy understood, some warnings should never be ignored. The story ends, but the legacy of humanity continues, a species that taught the stars that being nice is not weakness, and that holding back is sometimes the greatest strength of all.